Good morning. It's 6 a.m. here in North Hollywood. I'm speaking from the One Field Studios. I'm always very proud to say that, and because it's so new. We recently moved into a studio loft in the Arts District in North Hollywood, which is an area in the San Fernando Valley, separated by the actual Hollywood by the Hollywood Hills, and connecting Los Angeles by a valley called the Cahuenga Pass that will also go straight into Los Angeles. For those of you who are, like I am, very math inclined, gives you a little bit of an idea of our location. And we moved into this place, and I say we because I speak of our company, which includes my partner Adam Douglas Hayes, as well as a lot of wonderful stakeholders and affiliates and consultants and vendors, everybody who comprises what we create for our clients. We moved into this place on the first of the year, and it's been a long time coming. We've always wanted a large studio space where we can hold small events and do what we do best, which is hybrid events, combining live and Zoom events, and also recording audio and video for online education and marketing for our clients, which are largely coaches and transformational workers, as well as mind, body, and spirit practitioners, spiritual teachers, and a whole host of very interesting people and masters who work with various techniques and, I would say, lines of energy even, to create transformation and conscious evolvement and upliftment in those they serve. In a nutshell, we are focused on creating people who have a greater impact, who like to move from working with one-on-one people to speaking, to creating products that broaden their reach. And you notice I did a bit of rephrasing there with that. I believe that we are in a period right now where we are seeing what works and what doesn't work on how this is done, and it's very specific to each client. We have had a few clients as we have evolved over the last few years, and we really began in earnest just a few years ago to create this from me serving clients to a larger company, which includes a new website, a marketplace to market our clients' products and services, and also positioning ourselves as the hub of a community. So this is a bit of a lead-in. This is a bit of a lead-in to kind of bring you into this space, this physical space, this studio loft. There'll be a link underneath this where you can see pictures of this beautiful place. And today we are having a housewarming party, and many of my friends are coming, and we're going to be watching the Oscars. We're going to do a little housewarming. It's kind of a light studio launch for us. So we're having friends over, and it's going to be a beautiful social occasion, but it's not our proper launch of this space, which will happen once we have all our ducks in a row. And we're very excited, and this is not going to be a communication about my business and about this space, but I thought it was, maybe it's because it's 6 a.m. I hear my cat scratching over there, and I'm feeling slowly that this is my new home. Also feeling a bit of thrill because there was a certain amount of risk involved in this move. Moving into a space that is beginning to bring in people in person as a pandemic evolves and hopefully declines, has been a bit of a business leap in our bag of tools is getting bigger, and we're able to serve people at a greater level. But at the same time, that requires, as many of us know, inner growth on my part, and certainly, all of those associated with one field. We're stepping into something greater. So this is a good transition into what I'd like to speak about today, and that is my own personal spiritual practice. And this is coming forward on the heels of my miracle, and many of you know what has been happening with me for the past few years. Because I made it strategically public, and what that means is I spoke to this I tried to speak to this only with people who would hold this in a certain line of healing energy and not feel sorry for me, and not look at this as a bad thing, which is a challenge given the nature of the issue, but rather as an opportunity. And my own training is at the University of Santa Monica in the field of spiritual psychology. I got my master's degree in 2017, and I received I had several advanced degrees in this field also in the following years, as well as beginning a practice community of practicing the foundations of this work with another kind of satellite community from the University of Santa Monica, running these events as a facilitator. So I've been practicing this for a long time, and my spiritual practice really evolves from this. Just as that spiritual practice came into my life, it evolved from 12-step recovery work. I began my sobriety journey in 1995, and I've largely stayed sober since then. However, I have different definitions of addiction than I did in 1995. So my awareness is that the nature of being human is in fact one of addiction. This may be to a lot of different things. So even though I don't practice in a 12-step program anymore, I don't drink and I don't do drugs, but at the same time, my cat is addicted to clawing and making noise. But is that addiction? Well, that's a question. Well, interestingly enough, that statement is a bit of a context of how I view addiction, is many of the things people just do, like a cat clawing, just very casually, I've noticed has an addictive pattern in my own life, specifically those around lifestyle behaviors such as media, sex, food. I'd say caffeine has been in the past an addiction of mine. And I'm always evolving through these addictions, and I'm at a place now in the context of 12-step recovery work where I felt that I had relapses in certain areas in very strong ways, and that the practice in the container of 12-step meetings was not addressing that as a high level and as powerfully as my spiritual psychology practice. So I kind of went back in that direction at a certain point, but I just had no cravings for drugs or alcohol. And even though I recognized my participation in 12-step recovery could be very powerful on the service level, it wasn't really giving me what I need on the recovery level. And I can't say why, because many people, that's all they feel they need. And I can't second guess that. And I want you to notice right now, I'm going to be going into a pattern of what I call working with judgments and non-duality, which is the foundation or one of the kind of cornerstones of spiritual psychology, is working with judgments. So for me to look at somebody who has been in AA for 35, 40 years, and I've got a huge amount of time. I've got well over 2 decades in 12-step recovery work with continuous sobriety. And up to the point where I really found that I had more sobriety with a greater degree of freedom from addiction with some of the other tools that have came into my life. Up to that point, I've had encounters with just the most amazing and wonderful teachers. There was a man called Sandy Beach who gave a retreat with my men's group back in the early 2000s, and he really was just an amazing spiritual teacher. So many people in 12-step recovery who never venture beyond that have just a great freedom and spirituality and power that I remember very much envying, and I can't place myself above or below them at all. I don't enter into that realm as much as I can help it anyway. Of course, we tend to judge by habit. That's just our human nature. However, the spiritual psychology that came into my life also was a precursor to another spiritual journey. The foundational organization for the University of Santa Monica is the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, and this began by a very powerful and awakened master, John Roger. And I say that not from my personal experience, because even though I worked for the University of Santa Monica when John Roger was still alive, and he transitioned, I believe, in my first year of employment there, because I also worked for the University of Santa Monica while I attended and got my degrees there. Even though I didn't connect with him personally, the line of energy and mastery that he created with the University of Santa Monica was, in my awareness, the greatest transformation and the greatest source of spiritual power that I have encountered to this very day. And that includes the spiritual practice that I now do, which is not the movement of spiritual inner awareness, but rather the self-realization fellowship, which is my current spiritual practice. So to speak of this, and to speak of also Christianity, which is my father's practice, and which is the practice of many, some of our clients, some of my healers, the healer that really created this miracle that I'm kind of leading up to speaking about, and that I've kind of been dancing around. Well, we'll talk about that shortly. This evolution is very sacred to me in my consciousness. So I will occasionally encounter, for example, people in 12-step recovery who I very much can see have judgments of people who don't go to 12-step meetings anymore. Christians who have fundamentalist beliefs that include a strong judgment against people who don't have the exact interpretation of the Bible that they have. And of course, people in the spiritual psychology community not so much people in the self-realization fellowship community that I've noticed. And what's interesting about that observation on my part is that it is why that is my current spiritual practice. In the spiritual psychology community also, the practice is not judging somebody for being right or wrong. However, what that means on a personal level, what is right and what is wrong, is a very personal and special and sacred thing for me. What is right and what is wrong, beyond ideas of right and wrong, Rumi says, there is a field. I will meet you there, says Rumi. Rumi will meet us in this field beyond ideas of right and wrong. What is this field? One field, as we call our company. This reminds me of a meeting we had where we stopped and all simultaneously one field was having. We stopped and it was a spontaneous silence and meditation and breathing. We captured it on a recording. It's quite amazing. We just stopped and we breathed, which I love to do. And you can see that silence that came in was the answer to my question. So let's speak about spirituality. After I graduated from the University of Santa Monica, I went into an advanced program in consciousness, health, and healing. And that very powerful program, I'd say, unleashed some demons in me. Now, the demons came forward as a very strong addiction outbreak that I felt was even demonic in nature. I won't go into the specifics, but it put me in another 12-step program. It also opened up an awareness that there was something foundational that needed to be transformed very quickly. This was where I believe Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, is the guru who began the Self-Realization Fellowship. Now, at a certain point in time, I was receiving discourses from the movement of spiritual unawareness because John Roger, the line of energy that is part of the University of Santa Monica, was creating powerful tectonic changes in me. The first year of the University of Santa Monica, after the first year of intensive work, I was able to manifest the first long-term romantic relationship in my life. I called forward who I consider my life partner, Mark Cote. And many of you know Mark who are listening to this. We've been together for over 6 years at this point. And additionally, the addiction that came forward was connected, I think, with something that had occurred in a past life. There was a very special person that many people in the USM and MSIA community go to, who has knowledge of past lives and who's able to clear karmically, in many instances, some of this karma. If it is ready, in fact, to be cleared, it may still be there to teach us, ultimately to teach us how to come to God. In a nutshell, that is the context of spiritual psychology that we are in Earth School, and we're using this curriculum that we signed up for with other souls, perhaps even. Life life after life, we come back and we have different curriculum. We're coming into this earth school to learn what we need to learn. And what we need to learn is our essential nature, which is God and which is love. So I came through this incredible experience. At the same time, I transitioned out of the University of Santa Monica as an employee, and I began serving clients like I did before my almost nearly 4 years at USM on staff. I tried to start a business, but once I had USM under my belt, I was able to really begin this business and start it in a much more powerful way, leveraging the extraordinary transformation that had occurred at USM. So I'm in the flow of this tectonic shift as I'm going through this consciousness, health, and healing program. And it's not pretty and it's not painful. It nearly destroyed my relationship with Mark, who just knew to hang in there. He knew something was on the other side because he's a very intuitive person. And as I kind of came through this storm and it really began to recede, I went into Peru for 2 weeks. I went to Peru for 2 weeks and I underwent. I stepped into 7 ceremonies of ayahuasca treatment, which is a very powerful, transformational psychedelic substance that it's not a walk in the park. It's a very powerful hallucinogen administered under shamanic protection. And this foretold another journey that was coming forward. And sure enough, a few months after that journey, I had a diagnosis of prostate cancer from UCLA. So this is what I was speaking of earlier. I stepped into a whole new adventure, and I was very much prepared for this adventure. And it was very much tied to addictions and also tied to a very deep trauma that had occurred when I was a young child. And this trauma was foundational, I believe, to this condition. And it had come forward in the healing of the University of Santa Monica, and this trauma was associated with my family. And I did a lot of work to clear this. And at the same time, I was stepping into a very aggressive medical treatment at the University at UCLA, which is the same college that not only my mother had her cancer treatment at, my mother eventually passed on when I was 18 from skin cancer. But it was also where I got my first great success in life after getting sober from drugs and alcohol when I graduated from the UCLA School of Film and Television in 2002. So I now come back into UCLA to heal my cancer. So very aggressive surgery, radiation, hormone therapy for over a year. And as I kind of came back from the treatment, as my testosterone returned, there was a remission of cancer, and I began a very powerful intention to heal this naturally as well. And that journey was extensive, and again, many who have supported me in this journey. And again, I was trying to be strategic about who I told about this diagnosis, because I wanted to tell people who would consider it, like everything in life, as an opportunity. It's a sacred curriculum for us to clear everything that's needed for us to return to love, for us to return to God. So many people supported me, and the support they brought to me was the greatest element of this healing, because that was an experience, a direct experience of God in my life. So in the meantime, I'm also practicing. I've graduated, from from a very brief course of study with the foundational organization of USM, the MSIA, the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, into the teachings of Yogananda. It was kind of a natural shift. One was calling me. I had read Autobiography of a Yogi, which is Yogananda's autobiography, and I began the lessons from the Self-Realization Fellowship. And this was concurrent with the healing. I've been now studying their lessons for over five years, I believe, and I've since been initiated as a Kriya Yogi, which is a higher level of attainment in this practice. So the cancer was truly a great adventure that I brought forth multiple modalities of healing. And what eventually happened is my business partner in Seattle connected me with a healer in Kansas. His name was Byron Wade. And so at this point, I had read many books about spontaneous remission, radical remission. People have recovered from, because my cancer was very highly rated as aggressive. And it had seemed like there was a medical remission after all my treatment. So there was a certain perception of risk on my part, but I began to really look towards faith in a greater degree for clearing this from my body, for me to step forward into my inherent magnificence, which is my experience of God in this world. And I also was very much aware from my readings that so many of these healers were Christians. They were powerful Christians. They were straight up Christ is healing. Now, what was interesting about this is that when I began my practice with Yogananda, and also John Roger, the founder of MSIA and the chancellor of USM, always worked with the Christ. He called the Christ consciousness, which is similar to many practices of Christianity currently. And my father is a evangelical Christian. He's a born again. He has a Pentecostal faith, and his perception is that is an inaccurate experience of Christ. And so we had discussions with this, and with his faith, you must very much believe in exactly that particular interpretation and way of coming to Jesus. Whereas Yogananda and the University of Santa Monica and MSIA do not tell you what your path needs to be. It's one of self-discovery. And the Christ being part of USM and MSIA, even though at USM they don't teach this because they let you find your own way. They don't teach a specific spirituality. They just teach the practice of spiritual psychology. But with Yogananda, you have an altar, and the altar has in the very center Jesus Christ, right next to Krishna, who they call Bhagavan Krishna. And these foundational spiritual avatars, lines of energy, gurus, sit side by side, and even the words that I'm saying to describe them are describing the ineffable, God, figures of God, channelers of God, sons of God. Use your own words. These two sit, and then they sit next to each other on the altar, the same size, And then there are 4 gurus, which are the lines of the gurus. As many know from Eastern practice, when you have a guru, the guru has a guru. The guru has a guru in turn, and there's a line of gurus. And then there's always an end to that line. Yogananda was the end of that line of gurus. Before him was his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar. Before that, Lahiri Mahashai was Swami Sri Yuktasar's guru, and Lahiri Mahashai's master was what they call an avatar, whose name was Babaji. And this stretched into the beginning of, or the end of the 19th century, this line of gurus. So I was having an experience of Jesus for quite some time in this context. So I come to Byron finally, my healer, and I'm very, and by this time I'm beginning to speak about Jesus to my father. Now my father, again, is having a very powerful experience with his church. And he does hear me speaking to him about Jesus, but at the same time, he understands that I'm speaking in a different way about Jesus than him. So I have this powerful experience with Byron, and what's wonderful is I go to this healer in Kansas. He lives in Kansas, a small town in Kansas, and he's always got his eyes fixed to this portrait of Jesus on the wall. And he's speaking about Jesus, and I'm loving it because I didn't historically have an experience of Jesus. There was no Christianity in our family. And Yogananda had studied the Bible like few people study the Bible over the course of many years, possibly decades, I don't know. And he had written huge volumes of scriptural interpretation from his own attunement with God. So this is no light matter. I mean, you can put that level of involvement with Jesus and the scriptures next to, or surpassing on with just sheer commitment and attunement with any Christian in terms of their own study of the Bible, or most Christians. You don't really want to quantify this anyway. It's going down the wrong direction. However, the fact remains is that I consider Yogananda a Christian as much as I consider him a Hindu, which he is by tradition. So Yogananda would speak of saints of all religions, and the path of self-realization fellowship is a path towards devotion of this line of energy. And at a certain point, when you cross the threshold, that is your practice. You don't go towards any directions. That you have a meditation practice that's very focused on this. You have a personal relationship with Jesus, with Krishna, and with the line of gurus. So I'm with Byron, and he's looking at Jesus. And in the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda talks about visiting all these Christian and Catholic saints who have passion for God, for Christ. And Yogananda never ever says anything about correct or incorrect ways of coming to God, except when he does. But when he does, it's never about any particular religion being wrong. It's just that the attunement that there's many paths to God, and you have your own individual path, but that this line of energy of which Christ, Krishna, and then the gurus are truly part of is your practice when you do a full degree of commitment, because then you can just spend that time with this practice. And so Yogananda would go and see saints that would bleed and have stigmata and who just would have this passion for Jesus. And he just he was in heaven when he had encountered that. So he knew about Christ. He knew about people like Byron. And in my research, so many healers were Christians. So I had this awareness, and so I had this complete understanding. And I'm also very happy to be connecting with somebody with this passion for Jesus Christ, which I've never, both Krishna and Jesus, I've always felt the distance to them. It's like I'm working towards this, but how can they come into my heart in a very personal way? So this healing occurs, and it's very simple. It's a very simple process with Byron, as in many of the healers I read. It's that simple. It's not a lot of techniques and things. It's they heal. They just do, and Byron will test you for the healing. So I tested negative after my healing for prostate cancer with Byron. Now, of course, in my consciousness, I'm like, well, the medical back this up. So I had a PSA reading, which is it's a test that is considered very accurate after you've had surgery for prostate cancer for detecting the presence of cancerous cells in the body, and it was high. It had risen very quickly from remission right after I saw Byron. And I was thinking, part of me was like, oh, now it's going to be zero because I've been healed. But Byron had said that, okay, well, this doesn't do anything for the damage that's already been done, and it doesn't do anything for the damage that the healing, the medical interventions have done, but it breaks the pattern, it breaks the frequency of the cancer. So that's not going to grow. So what I did is I considered that high test 2 days after after Byron's healing on me to be a test marker, whatever you call that statistic. That is a control statistic, I believe. So a month went by, and I took another PSA test, and there was virtually no rising of the PSA at all, and I considered that my healing. And I consider that my healing under Jesus Christ as a personal expression of love and in connection to Jesus Christ, which is glorious. And also, at this point, I was expressing this to my parents, my father, and my father was getting very happy because, as an evangelical Christian, there was a calling to bring people to Jesus and in his faith. So recently he's contacted me about being baptized in a Pentecostal church. And yet, everything that's occurred in this new experience of Jesus, and at a certain point, his church had sent me a white handkerchief that they prayed over, and they gave me some Bible verses to read. And I've just been waiting to get into the Bible because I've had so many. I've read wonderful, wonderful books about Christ. However, I started going to the Bible and reading some passages, and much as Yogananda, my guru, had spent eons of time doing as well. And this was a way into a new personal relationship with Jesus, and I'm also interested if I'll be having this with Krishna as well. So my father, as you can see, there's something. My father is also. I don't want to speak too personally about my father, but only in context of our own communications, because he can speak for himself. My father is now at a point, as an older parent, I want to communicate to him respectfully, but it's also time, and this is a huge part of my healing. And as many of you know, the prostate is a male organ. Not too esoteric a bit of knowledge, and the healing is indeed like related to gender as well. And to me, it was related to a trauma involving my masculinity also. And the healing has involved stepping into a greater experience as a man, as a business leader, as a partner, and as a man in this world. What this also means is stepping forward as a man in my relationship with my father and stating my truth with courage and conviction, stating my truth of my own spiritual practice, of my own relationship with God, stating my truth as a loving son, but also stating my truth in context to my own path of mastery, and my own path of self-knowledge, and my own path of knowledge of my own divinity, of the divinity of Christ, and of the divinity of my path. This evolution to God and to Christ is deeply personal. So it came forward to do this podcast and this communication as an answer to my father about stepping into a Pentecostal baptism. And it's an offer I'll decline, but I'll be able to bring forward this communication, this context. And also to bring forward a powerful understanding that as children of God, it is now a great opportunity to step beyond our judgments of nations, of religions, who may be doing things in a way that we believe are wrong and bad. Now, with our own inner attunement to God, we know what is towards God and we know what is away from God. And we call one good and we call one evil. We call one God, we call one Satan. We have our words, we have our terms, we have our understandings that are truly evolving in our consciousness through our own perceptual filters of the material world that we live in, this classroom that we're in. And as we step forward to God, towards God, what we experience is unconditional love beyond ideas of right and wrong. What we experience is a way of moving beyond a tribal mentality, of ideas of nation, of limited ideas of family, but stepping into the family of man, of women, of humans, stepping into our essential nature, which is of the Christ, of God. And this freedom is our way of actualizing into great strength and courage that will create us as sacred and spiritual warriors to put our actions towards how we see God in this world. And how will we act? Will we act with anger? Will we act with againstness, which drains that from us? We can use things like anger. We can use it to bring our energy up. We can use things like fear to give us a certain amount of power, but yet the ultimate power is beyond that. We can use the emotional bodies in every way they show up in this world to get to that point where we don't identify with that part of us, where we just identify with the Christ within us, with the Buddha within us, with our Krishna, with our Muhammad. So as I complete, I want to bring forward a great deal of gratitude on this morning. And as I've been speaking, dawn has just begun to light up the sky. It's 6:49. It's a nice, beautiful podcast increment of time, and today will be a very special day. Friends will be coming to join me. They'll be celebrating this miracle of my health. They'll be celebrating this miracle of manifestation from one field. And we'll be celebrating each other. We'll be celebrating the God in each of us, the Christ in each of us. And we'll be celebrating the beloved child of God within each of us, coming out to play with each other. We'll be celebrating the fact that we can be in a world that may be going mad with the convolutions of form identification. What that means, in the words of the Eagles, is don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. You know, I had to throw in a pop music reference, of course. So let's all go out and let's be that love who we are. And let's always remember the silence within.